Hello, I am Chris Hoffman.
And I'm Dan O'Hara.
And in this video, we're going to be breaking down two uniquely American-originated musical styles, that being jazz and the blues.
These genres evolved from over 150 years, from the roots of musical styles in Africa to the styles that immigrated with the slave cultures in the U.S. in the 19th century. Foremost of these would be the Negro spirituals that connected with the trials and the suffering of the lives of the African Americans, as well as the spiritual beliefs held by the African Americans. Parallel here exists with the emergence of the blues in the early 20th century. Ragtime was also a 19th century style that has more parallels with jazz.
One important quality of both jazz and the blues is that they are beat-oriented musical styles that emerged from the Negro spirituals and ragtime prior to the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s and 30s. They adapted as instruments like the guitar began to take their place in the music we know today. And when I say beat-oriented, I mean music that is primarily driven or influenced by the beat.
The African American styles began to take on new forms as artists started to incorporate brass instruments. Then they started to adapt to styles more similar to that of marching bands and even ragtime music in many cases.
And it was at this juncture that the primary split between the music of jazz and the blues occurred. For although both genres use both string and brass instruments, jazz has been traditionally the more brass-focused genre, while the blues is the more guitar and bass, string-oriented genre.
But first we'd like to talk about the backbone of all music that we listen to today, whether it be jazz, to blues, to rock, to even dubstep. It's called syncopation.
Syncopation is essentially various rhythms that give the song its beat. In ways, it's more unexpected than you'd think.
The word syncopation actually means disturbance or interruption. So if we think about it, it's really like the disturbance in the musical field of time. This is achieved by adding accents or emphasis or rests in places that were generally not more expected. While all music does this to some extent, in blues and jazz, these effects tended to come out more in stages of the music that were different from what was normally traditionally done.
Think, for instance, of the Rolling Stones' hit song, I Can't Get No Satisfaction. But even if we look at the basic melody, we see a variance of what the melody plays to the single beat. Dan. 1, 2, 3. I can't get no. I can't get no satisfaction. Hey. This technique is utilized all the time in jazz and blues music. It's that rhythm that creates the vibe that makes us want to dance.
That's why these styles were originally considered to be called devil's music in the first place. It was a type of disturbance that led more traditionalists in music, and those who tended to hate anything by African Americans, to brand it as jungle music and even devil's music. Why? Because it inspired us to finger snap.
No.
Toe tap.
No.
It even inspired us to dance.
Oh. Some people are horrible dancers.
And that's why they branded it as barbaric.
That's right. Instead of following some monotonous tick like that of a clock, we get a beat that makes us wanna pop like a drum. Right. Let's look at another example. Take the song Whole Lotta Love by Led Zeppelin. See if you can notice the disturbance in the field of time that we call syncopation.
Now with the drums you get a different disturbance. Something that sounds a little bit like this.
Put it all together and you have the tasty jam that we know is Whole Lotta Love. Other primary jazz chords include the minor 7 and major 7 chords. Now, if I switch to the key of D, what we heard before with the dominant chord would sound like this. If we played a D major 7 chord, though, that sounds like this. Whereas a D minor 7 chord sounds like this. These chords have sort of a dreamier tone. It's almost like dozing off into the night and has a very chill kind of feel. I'm going to play first the D major 7 and then the D minor 7 chords again. Let's see if you can hear the difference.
Well, folks, that's all we have for jazz, being that we ourselves are rockers. We are now entering into our strong area, the blues, which is the foundation for all rock music. The chords that primarily drive the sound and feel of the blues are also 7 chords, but they are regular or traditional 7 chords, and are not to be mistaken with the jazz chords that we covered before. They have their own distinctive feel to them.
Here are some chords that are primarily used in blues. For example, the E7 chord, the A7 chord, and the B7 chord. These sounds can easily be demonstrated in one of the greatest blues anthems of all time. It's in the classic Blues Brothers movie, and that song is Sweet Home Chicago. These chords have a lot of spank on them, and you'll see that they're very groovy.
First, we're going to demonstrate the song Sweet Home Chicago with just regular chords as opposed to the 7 chords.
1, 2, 3, count.
Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Oh, come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Back to that same old place, Sweet Home Chicago.
Now let's hear what Sweet Home Chicago sounds like with those nasty blues 7 chords. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Back to that same old place, Sweet Home Chicago.
Now it's time to check another aspect that both genres use frequently. It's called call and response. It emerged in African American church services when a preacher would call out something important and the audience would respond, perhaps with an amen, or by repeating what the preacher said. In this way, the services were interactive, and there was repetition of important parts of the sermon with the listeners participating.
Very simple, yet very effective.
Think of it as 2 distinct phrases. You have your first phrase, which is the call. Then you have your second phrase, which is your response. Generally, the response is repeated. We're going to show you this with a guitar jam to the groove of Band to the Bone. Response.
Call.
Response. Call. Call and response can even be demonstrated vocally. Take, for instance, the Who's popular hit, My Generation. People try to put us down my generation. Because I can get around down my generation. Almost also talking about my generation. I'd rather die before I get off. Talking about my generation. Talking about my generation. My generation.
Each stanza of the verse for the song is essentially your calls, while the talking about my generation is your response. And it repeats like that throughout the course of the song.
This can even be demonstrated with the popular Ramones punk hit,
I want to be sedated.
1, 2, 3,
24 hours to go. I wanna be sedated. Nothing to do, nowhere to go home. I wanna be sedated. Just get me to the airport and put me on the plane. Hurry, hurry, hurry before I go away. I can't control my fingers, I can't control my brain. No, no, oh, 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 oh.
Well, guys and gals, that's it for today's video.
Hopefully we've given you a new and interesting way to look at the music that you love. Keep on rocking in the free world, and cheers.
We're going to leave you today with a classic blues track that demonstrates most of the techniques we discussed today, including the chords, syncopation, and overall feel of the blues. And that is Crossroads by Eric Johnson.
Crossroads by Robert, not Eric Johnson.